So as you guys can see from the video, I think it's fairly clear. You see this to me. There's been lots of attempts at gadgets, different gadget platforms, widgets, etc. But Sidebar completely stands on its own. It's completely unique. Microsoft invented the idea around widgets and gadgets. No, just seeing if I can get your attention to start. Looks like I did. The fact of the matter is, widgets, gadgets, they've been around lots of forms, taken lots of forms, different applications. They've been around for a long time, and it's constantly evolving. My name is David Streams. I'm a group program manager in Windows, and I'm going to share with you over the next hour our vision for Sidebar. We're going to walk through some demos. We're going to take a look at the features and take a look at what it takes to build a gadget. So to start with, the core principle around Sidebar revolves around simplicity. Simplicity for our users, simplicity for the developers. So for our users, we're really trying to evoke an emotional response. This is an integrated part of the Vista operating system. It's centered around gadgets, which are very focused mini applications that are very simple and easy to use. For developers, simplicity takes another form. That is that the platform's built around DHTML. So you can leverage all the skills that you already have with HTML, CSS, XML, and HTML to build these gadgets. But it goes further than that. When you're building these gadgets, you won't be using a compiler. All you're doing is packaging up this HTML, CSS into a little bundle, we'll talk about in a while, and you can distribute these things. So you don't have to build setup programs. So you're not going to have to go and install Shield, build some complex installation program. It's simple to build these things. It's simple to consume them, easy to distribute them, and then it's easy to find. So within the platform, when you've installed all these gadgets in your system, we're deeply integrated with Vista. So Vista Search will make it easy to find gadgets based on various metadata that you can publish about your gadgets. And for gadget publishers, which I hope there's going to be many in the crowd today, we're creating a service in the cloud, so you'll be able to post those gadgets to a website and make them available to the tens, if not hundreds of millions of people that will be using Windows Vista. Kind of juxtaposed against simplicity is being powerful. So how do you do both? In simplicity, it's easy to develop, easy to use these gadgets, but it's also very powerful. You can take full advantage of the Windows operating system in a couple of ways. Through script, we're going to provide an object model so that it makes it very easy to interact and get system information. So let's say I'm building a CPU gadget that wants to look at the CPU cycles I'm using or memory, or I want to monitor my wireless network availability or the strength of my wireless signal. We've bubbled all that system information up into a very easy to use object model that you can access through script. But at the same time, we give you access to any objects that you can access through automation. So automation comes, been around since VB4 in '97. And you can write the code to interact with these objects. So a lot of power in that. In terms of the graphics, it's HTML. So of course we're going to support HTML, PNGs, JPEGs, GIFs. But our rendering technology is based on MS-HTML, which is what IE uses. And that gives you actually even more depth. So you can build on technologies like a vector markup language, VML. You can take advantage of DirectX and DX Transform. And what that will give you the ability to do is add even greater richness to your gadgets. And I think you're going to see some examples of that today. So as I mentioned earlier, what we're really going after here is to create an emotional response to Sidebar. Create something that was really stunning. So you can see the Sidebar on the right side of the screen has a very subtle gradient. The gadgets themselves, some of them are non-rectangular, so we alpha blend nicely with the desktop. We have integrated search. We have interesting animations. So perhaps at this time, why don't I just give you a tour? So when you power on Vista, by default, Sidebar is going to be on, and we're going to ship with several gadgets that will be available out of the box. But from then on, it's all about personalization. We hope to have thousands and thousands of these gadgets available so that you can choose the gadgets that are interesting to you and download them, install them. So the gadgets are installed locally on your machine, and then they're managed by the Sidebar. So there's kind of an interesting trend here. We're seeing trends like widescreen monitors, people using multi-monitor displays. And these types of folks, they're not going to mind, a lot of them are not going to mind giving up a little bit of screen real estate to the sidebar. But by default, we wanted to minimize that, the screen real estate the sidebar takes up. So out of the box, if I bring up another window, it'll cover up the gadgets and the sidebar themselves. This is its default mode. So you're not giving up any screen real estate at all to accommodate sidebar and the gadgets. But then you're probably thinking, well, that's great, but how do I get to the gadgets then? I have to minimize windows or resize them. That's not optimal. Well, we have this quick glance mode. And what that gives you the ability to do is you hold down the Windows space bar, and it'll temporarily bring the gadgets all to the front so that you can interact with them. And then when you're done, click away, and they disappear again. Sidebar also has a representation here as a task icon in your taskbar. And so you can do things like when you double click, if you just want to get rid of the sidebar, you can bring it back. Kind of cool little animation. You can sit here and do that all day. And then you can access different properties of the sidebar. So maybe I'm one of those folks that have the big widescreen monitor, and I want to have my gadgets persisting kind of in my periphery at all times. I can easily set sidebar to be always on top. I can also dock the sidebar to the left or to the right. Oh, lovely bug. When I go into this mode, you can see that the sidebar is still translucent, but it's a little bit more opaque. It's kind of in line with the taskbar. And again, if I bring a window up and maximize it, now it maximizes against the sidebar, and the sidebar goes completely opaque, just like the taskbar. So the sidebar is really part of the Windows shell experience. Complements things like the taskbar, where applications go to minimize. So next, I'm going to just put that back to its normal mode here, or default mode, if you will. Let's talk a little bit about gadgets. So as you saw maybe in the demo this morning, or the keynote this morning, I should say, we have this notion of a gadget gallery that you can instantiate. This represents all of the gadgets that are local to my machine that I've installed on my hard drive. So I can go out and browse the web, I find a gadget I want, I can install it, it shows up in the gallery. And there's some things I can do here. I mentioned the search. So I can do this as a word wheel. It will search based on metadata, based on the name of the gadget and metadata that the developer makes available in the gadget manifest. So that, again, we've tried to pay really particular attention to doing cool things, like these little animations. Once again, I could sit here and play with this all day, little animations. We also have ways to filter gadgets. So if I install maybe hundreds of gadgets, I want to be able to filter them and see that recently installed gadgets. Also, when you're developing a gadget has a manifest where you provide different metadata and descriptions. And part of that is a vendor company. So here you can sort, or filter, I should say, by just the gadgets from Microsoft. And as I install gadgets maybe from Yahoo or Fox Sports, that will show up in my list, and I'll be able to very quickly see just those gadgets that meet that criteria. As I click around in this gallery, too, you see that some data updates in this lower pane. This is where, again, I can get information about the gadget. So as a developer, a gadget developer, you can provide things like copyright information, a logo, other metadata that describes the gadget, as well as a link. So you might provide a link where people can go to get updated news on the gadget or perhaps newer versions. The process of adding gadgets, again, is simple. You can double-click, and you can start adding these things to the bar, or you get little script errors like that. And as I add these gadgets, I can also drag them onto the desktop. But I'm just going to add a few here. Gadgets can also be multi-instanced. You can notice after the bar fills up, some of them simply go away. Well, we have a feature where you can scroll between multiple columns of gadgets. So they go into overflow. So you can keep 20 or 30 gadgets, if you choose, available to you at all times in this kind of this overflow capability. As I mentioned, gadgets can live inside of the sidebar, or you can drag it to the desktop. Some other things to point out. I'm going to give you a preview kind of some things to come here related to our object model. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I think it's important to point out. These gadgets, when they're docked in the sidebar, you have about 130 pixels to work with in width. So when you're designing your gadgets, that's a challenge. You want to figure out how to best utilize that screen real estate. We're going to introduce a new concept called a flyout, and it'll be inside of the object model. And what it will allow you to do, let's say this RSS feed, I kind of want to get a little bit more information about a feed. I could click on it, and you can imagine a flyout window coming up and progressively disclosing a bit more information. Perhaps it gives me the first couple sentences from each of the feeds. If I click in the flyout then on the feed, it could instantiate the full browser. So that's some things to come. Some other features that we have, there's some features that are common to all gadgets. So if I right-click, I can basically make sure that this gadget is always on top. So if I want this gadget to always be in my field of view, I can set it to always on top. I can even change its opacity so that I can see through to other things in the desktop, and as I hover over it, the opacity goes back to 100. So again, these are features you get for free when you build a gadget. Gadgets also have settings, and settings are things, properties that you want to persist across across restarts. So RSS feeds. When I start the RSS gadget, it has a default setting the developer defined. But then I, as a developer, can also create a settings dialog that allows me to configure and store my preferences. So think of settings as preferences. Once I set this up, so in this case, I chose the CNET News RSS feed. If I close Sidebar and restart, it will store those preferences and reapply them when Sidebar starts again. So I'm going to switch back to slides. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the principles you should be aware of when you're designing gadgets, or things to be aware of. The first and probably most important thing you want to do is to keep it simple. So let's say I want to build an Outlook gadget. You don't want to build a gadget that would be inbox, calendar, tasks. It's trying to do too much. These should be single purpose. What you might want to do is build 5 gadgets for Outlook. One that's targeted on email, one that's targeted on calendar, one targeted for tasks, etc. Also, remember that the user's in control. So if you use this precious screen real estate that you have in the gadget for advertising, they're probably going to turn it off. You also need to think about different states. So you saw that the gadget can live in the sidebar, and the gadget can also be undocked or floating in this floating mode. And our object model exposes these events that you can handle in code. So a lot of folks think, immediately, well, when I'm undocked, I want to immediately grow that gadget, make it bigger. Don't do that. Basically, the rules that we go by with our own gadgets that we're building that will ship with the operating system is that only grow the gadget when it's in undocked mode if you have additional information that you really couldn't accommodate when it was docked. So one example might be the calculator. We have a calculator, and when it's in undocked mode, we expand the view to allow it to have a paper tape that kind of shows the history of the calculations that you've done. And that's only available in undocked mode, and so that's an example where we grew the gadget. Again, we've gotten a lot of feedback from users saying they don't want big gadgets, and again, they're going to turn them off. The last thing I wanted to cover is about smart defaults. So a lot of gadgets are going to access web services, for example. If you're on an airplane and you start up Sidebar and your gadget comes up and there's a little 404 error in the window, that's probably not the best experience for your users. They're probably going to turn it off. So you want to be smart about handling things like offline and maybe perhaps caching data and providing useful information and perhaps even graphics to the user, and handle smart defaulting as well. Let's talk about this bundle that I alluded to earlier. So I'm building a gadget. As I'm developing this thing, I can just do everything inside of a directory structure. It's that simple. I'm getting ready to deploy it. I can throw it into a zip file. I can rename the .zip to .gadget because the sidebar registers for the .gadget extension, and then it knows how to install that package. We also support cab files. So if it's important to you to be able to digitally sign your gadget, we support the .cab files. So what's inside of this bundle? The main thing is something called a gadget.xml file. And it's simply a manifest. So that you're going to have descriptive data. For example, what's the name of the gadget? You're going to have that copyright information, the things that you saw in the gadget gallery. You're also going to have information such as links to the HTML page that's going to drive the gadget view. It's going to reference the JS files that contains the functionality and behaviors for your gadget, as well as links to images or maybe resources that you're going to use to localize the gadget in. In a word, it's everything. It's everything related to the gadget, bundled up into a zip file and deployed with a .gadget extension. It's that simple. So let's talk a little bit more about how you develop these things. So as I mentioned earlier, the rendering platform we chose was MS-HTML, which is very ubiquitous because it's what IE uses, Internet Explorer uses for all of its rendering. Again, the programming model is built around standards, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and XML. So you can leverage everything that you know, everything that you do today as designers and web developers. You can go deeper. As I mentioned earlier, you can do cool animations and things like VML or DX transforms to add another level of richness to your gadgets. And you can go down to the metal, because we do support automation and COM. But we hope that you won't have to go down to the metal, because we want to make it easier than that. We want to expose a rich set of functionality that we think you'll need to build a gadget that interacts and takes advantage of Windows features through our gadget object model. And last, we have a security model. As I mentioned, gadgets are installed. Switch back. Gadgets are installed onto the desktop. So when you develop the gadgets, we're very web-like, writing DHTML, etc. When you're deploying and installing these gadgets, we're very much like applications. So you install them locally. So when I deploy a gadget, I have a gadget right here on my desktop. Maybe somebody emailed me this gadget, or I saved it from the website. When I double-click on it, you get a warning. Do you want to run the gadget? It's an unknown publisher, because I haven't signed this gadget. And then it warns me, just like an application would warn me, that it could do harmful things. And if I don't know where I got it, you may not want to install it. Okay, there we go. In terms of globalization, it's very simple. All the gadgets we ship from Microsoft, we're going to support all the languages that Vista supports. And what we do is we create a hierarchy of directories inside of our gadget bundle that support the various languages. And then we use the operating system to be smart about what languages to load. So if I'm in a German operating system and I go to install a gadget, it'll look for a German directory. If it doesn't find it, the OS is smart enough about walking up kind of a fallback chain, if you will, until it gets back to the root and it loads whatever language resources it can that it has. And we're going to support rich scenarios. So there's some languages, for example, that go right to left instead of left to right. And our gadgets and the platform inherently support that. So to take the next step, I really wanted to get a third party, somebody, an early adopter, somebody that's used this technology, developed it. So I want to invite Carl Sobeski from Yahoo Music up to demonstrate what he's learned using the platform. So Carl?
Hello, everyone. I'm a software tech lead at Yahoo Music. I don't know if I can get going here.
Got it.
Okay, today you might have seen the music gadget demoed at the general session talk, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, which is this thing right here. This is a prototype that I've done. I'm the only one who's working on this, but we are planning to release, when Vista releases, we're planning to release a gadget like this. And not only will we release something, but we also would like to open up our APIs to let you develop your own music-oriented widgets. So you can, or gadgets, so that you could, extend and hit areas that we're not hitting. Like if you have some great idea to do music in a shareable way, we want to open up our APIs to let you do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today too. So let's get into this thing. So basically the idea is that with a lot of the music services now. It requires a big download of an application. The application, it takes a long time to start up. It takes over your entire screen. It's really geared towards managing your music. But sometimes you just want to listen to some music. I really don't want to deal with ripping CDs, or I really don't want to deal with copying things around or tagging things. All I want to do is just type in some artist or an album or a track title and start playing it. So that's what this gadget's all about. So let's just search for, let's say we want to hear songs by Train. So this is making a call out to our web services, again, which we're going to open up, that will allow you to see all the albums by Train. And let's see. And again, you're getting access to over a million tracks.
She doesn't know the dress. Her hair is always a mess.
So we also offer things like, for example, you can, if you want to know what other artists are related to Train or similar to Train. Basically, the idea here is, you're trying to think of music you want to listen to. You type in an artist name, and we'll show you ones that are related, and so on. If I wanted to see artists that are related to Vertical Horizon, there you go, right? And I can drill down. Okay, if I want to hear Yahoo Music also has a Launchcast radio service. We have a free version and a plus version, but you can listen to radio stations that will play tracks similar to Train, for example. Here's you can play the radio station. Okay, and I'll show you the playlist here that's been creating. Now, if I want to go back to, let's say I want to look at Jack Johnson again, everything is clickable here. I can go back, and it'll bring up Jack Johnson tracks, and so on. Now, you know that this is getting a bit big, right? That's what David was talking about before. What we're planning to do is have this all be implemented, using a flyout, which is coming. They don't have it in the build, which is the February CTP build that I'm running. But the idea would be do a search and then have the results fly out. Some other things to notice too is that they support desktop transparency, and these are just PNG files that I'm using for the backgrounds. And you can see how it kind of morphs and everything. I didn't have to write any of that code. Basically, what I'm doing is I have a single background, which is this smaller background. And when I expand, I'm just loading in a bigger background, and then I'm calling a sidebar function to tell it to morph to the new background. So that whole transition thing you're seeing is actually provided to you by the platform. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the web services that we'll make available to you. Right now, this gadget is actually using the web services that the Yahoo Music Engine uses. Those aren't really ready for, those services were kind of geared towards the Yahoo Music Engine. We want to clean them up and make them public, so that'll be coming within a few months. There'll be some URLs you can at the end of the talk that will list it. You can go to the website for more information. One is developer.yahoo.net. And another one is www.ymusicblog.com. In fact, this gadget that I'm going to show you now will be made available on the YMusic blog site. So this one is just I want to show you some code here. What I did. This one is just a simple gadget that lets me type in artist names and just show me their album covers. So here we see for Sheryl Crow, and I can just go through all the albums, right? Okay, so let's look at some code really quick. So we're looking at this gadget here. So basically, this gadget is very simple. There's really 3 text files in the entire gadget. The rest are the images that you see here. We can look at these text files really quickly. This is the manifest file that David was talking about, gadget.xml. It just has some information about the name of the gadget, the author, the copyright, and where the HTML lives, which will load when this gadget is loaded. The next is the HTML, and this is straight HTML CSS stuff. Nothing fancy here. Basically, having a body tag that when it's loaded, it's going to call it on gadget load function. I have my images from my album art, some spans to show the text, an input field for the search, and 2 images that I use for the buttons. Right, very simple. Okay, now looking at the code. So here's some examples of the web services that we're going to be providing to you. This one here allows you to do searches on artists. So, for example, if I wanted to search for the Beatles, I would just use this one, and I have show you the XML that comes back for that. Right, so this is what the code is going to be dealing with. Again, we're going to clean all this stuff up. There's not going to, so the APIs that we provide you will have a lot less of this and really geared towards your task. So when we get this back, we're going to be looking for some artist ID, if I can find it in here. So it's one of these fields that I just can't. And so when we get the artist ID back, we're going to make this other call right here, where we're going to get all the metadata about the artist. This call will give us all the artist's albums, their tracks, all the album art URLs, and so on. And you can see what that looks like. This is for the Beatles. So you can see the different album releases and the album art URLs. Okay, so let's look at the code. Is again, it's very simple stuff. So basically, when I type something in, I hit the enter key. I'm going to call this do search function, and this do search function is basically going to make that web service call using the artist name that we passed in. And I do that through this info request object it's a very simple thing that wraps up the XML HTTP object. So as you can see here, I'm using a COM object to make the web service call. When I come back, basically I'm going to call the function that's passed into me here, which is the search done. So basically what search done will do is that, it gets that XML blob that you saw. It'll do an XPath here to get down to the nodes that I'm looking for, and it's going to grab that ID that I was looking for. And when I get it, I'm just basically going to make another web service call, again, using this artist ID. And when I get done with that, I am going to go through the other XML blob that I showed, and basically grabbing the title of the albums and the images. And when I get that, I basically just set my images, the source of my images, to the URLs that I just read in. And the button clicks basically just go through that array that I created, and just set the album art. So very, very simple. Again, if you go up to if you visit the Y Music blog website, probably tomorrow, I'll have this up posted. If you want, you can download it. If you're running Vista, the February CTP, you can run it. You can look at the code. You can play with it. Do your own music searches and so on. So again, so basically, just wanted to say that not only is Yahoo going to do gadgets, but we also want to open it up for you to create your own music gadgets. Not only gadgets, but if you want to do mashups and everything else using Yahoo Music, we want to open up to you. And I want to mention there's a talk tomorrow in this room at 10:30, building AJAX applications using Yahoo Web Services. Jeffrey McManus will be giving that, and check out that talk for more information about that. So basically that's...
Great. Thanks a lot, Carl. Thanks for sharing. So I have another set of folks I'd like to ask up. Jesse Edwards and Don Sestellian from Fox Interactive Media. Jesse works on the development side of the house. Don's representing more of the designer perspective. And like Carl, I'd like them to share kind of their experience building Sidebar gadgets from Fox. So come on up.
Thanks. Am I on? OK. First off, we're really excited to be here today. I'm Don Sestellian. This is Jesse Edwards. And we're with Fox Interactive Media, and we'd like to show you our gadget. So first question would be, actually, why did we decide to build a gadget? I mean, obviously, the technology isn't going to come out immediately, so we're not going to see any immediate benefit. We really were very excited about it because it gave us an opportunity to explore a new way to interact with users. We also had some code laying around from projects that we've done before in the past that allowed us to really quickly build the gadget. So in the past, we built an application for DirecTV called the DirecTV Game Tracker, and that was a kind of an all-inclusive sports application. So we took some of the feeds from that, and let me switch over here and pull that up real quick. We took these feeds basically from our NFL section, which is what the gadget that we've currently built is. We took these feeds and ported that into the Microsoft Gadget platform. Essentially, we really didn't have to, we didn't have to use the entire feed. We just pulled out what we needed and put it in place. So those same feeds from that giant interface that we built there, and the same feeds that you would find on a Fox Sports, for example, we'll just basically ported directly into the gadget that we built. So with the exception is that with the DirecTV piece that we built, we actually used the entire screen. So it's not very user-friendly in terms of what if I want to keep watching the game during the day while my document is open? What if I want to keep making sure that I don't get fired while I'm watching the Final Four? How can I get my work done and watch the game at the same time? So we were really excited about the gadget because that gave us the ability to actually build this tiny little interface that lets me watch the game during the day while my documents are open. Or, for example, watch several games during the day. To just keep track of the games that I was excited about. Now, what we have here, we've actually built this one for football, and this is a simulation pulling RSS an XML feed off the local machine. However, this was live at the time that we first built it around the end of last year. So, I mean, we kind of sat around the campfire and really enjoyed playing around with this. But we also thought, well, hey, wouldn't it be great if instead of having just these, the little widgets or gadgets on the sidebar, what if we could provide a little bit more rich experience for the user? The DirecTV piece we built was all data. I mean, not really. It was kind of fun to look at, but really, it's just text and who the team is and what the score is, and it really wasn't that fun to play with. So how do we take and build a nice little experience that is a little bit more fun, that can kind of give me a little bit more insight into the game as it's going on, so I can track who's got the ball, which direction the ball is going, where it's at, where the line of scrimmage is, et cetera. And we had a lot of fun with this. So, and really, we built this taking advantage of the different aspects that were available to us with gadgets. So We also thought one of the things that we found was fun to play with was that while this thing is sitting in here, as you've seen me talk, these things have been kind of flashing around different colors. So really, without paying much attention, to the gadget as the games are going on during the day, the user can be alerted to the fact that, for example, the ball is in the end zone, or one of the teams just scored. Additionally, if the game is over, this would actually tell that person who won the game, so they could just kind of keep an eye on it without being deeply involved. So. I want to talk just a little bit about what to include on your gadget. One of the things that we obviously fought over was how much do we include? Do we include too much? Do we include too little? Obviously, just the score is not enough to really keep people, interested in a gadget during the course of the day. So we did want to put in that extra state to give them something to play with. But we wanted to make sure that the gadget also had other information in it as well. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about designing gadgets. As it was mentioned, gadgets on the sidebar are limited to 130 pixels. We also uncovered a couple of things while we were building these gadgets that kind of caught us by surprise. One of them is this little blue glow that you see around the gadget. The technology is kind of sensitive right now to the transparency, to the alpha transparency around the gadget. If you're not real careful, and you can see right here, we kind of weren't real careful with that. You can see little areas where the transparency isn't perfect, so keep that in mind. Additionally, if you're not real careful with the alpha channel, sometimes little pink dots can show up around the alpha as well. One of the things we try and do when we're designing our gadgets is we really try and focus on eating our own dog food. We want to make sure that the people that we have working on these actually use them while they're building them. This really helps us in terms of making sure that we're designing something that's both usable and fun, and is actually going to be useful for the end user as well. We like to talk to content experts and make sure that the data that's going into them is relevant. And of course, as you can see, we kind of had fun with the interface, but we didn't go too far. I mean, we didn't make things expand or grow or jump around too much. We just really gave them information that we felt was going to be useful in a way that ultimately they could use without losing productivity at work. How many designers do we have in the audience? Excellent. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Jesse at this point, and he's going to actually get into the stuff that you guys probably care a little bit more about, which is the coding practices and the things that we use to make this stuff work.
Hello? Okay, there we go. Hey, everyone. As you've seen, Don, from both Yahoo and us and the other gadgets, you can really make some powerful and engaging interfaces. The beauty of all of this is that it only really requires a minor amount of knowledge and investment. I mean, you have HTML, you have CSS, you have JavaScript, and that's really what all of these are built with. So I'll actually show you with ours. Basically, the HTML is made up of a few div layers, some image tags, and not a lot else. We have a lot of complex layering of elements to show actual user interaction. We have mouse over states, mouse down states. We have multiple different windows, different levels of navigation, but really everything is housed and laid out in a single HTML page. The next thing is the CSS. That's really what controls the look and feel of the gadget. And the gadget as a platform is really nice because you can make changes to your CSS, to your JavaScript, to your HTML modify it and just pop open another gadget, and those changes happen real time. And what's great is the old gadget that was previously in the sidebar still uses the old code that was loaded. So you can actually compare your changes to them. And I'll actually show that right now. We'll save that out. Oops. Yeah. Yeah, hold on. And we'll go in here and relaunch another gadget. And now, as you see, the away team's color is red. And the gadget that was still previously open is unchanged. You can do this also with images. One thing is that when working with gadgets, the alpha channel that's created for your external window or for your external boundaries is auto-created by the gadget software the first time you run a gadget. And when you crack open the folder, you'll actually see these pink alpha channel and then the channel of the image itself. And so when you're updating images that actually affect that region, make sure you delete those alpha regions, or sometimes it may not overwrite them because it doesn't know that it needs to redraw them. So this way you can ensure that your changes are accurately reflecting what you're doing. All right. So for our gadget, what we've actually done is, like Don said, the gadget persistently stays on the desktop, and it pulls an XML feed every 15 seconds. We've done this using JavaScript intervals, and it's really simple, easy to do, and basically this is what launches our whole gadget. It calls fetch data and then creates an interval that runs. The one important thing to note about intervals is you are on the user's machine. Intervals can take up a lot of resources, especially if you do a large number of them. So if you're going to use intervals to pull your data on a time basis, try to do it in a reasonable number of intervals. You don't want to pull every second. Also, you don't want to have multiple intervals pulling all at the same time. If you can do everything in one step, it's best to do that. Once we pull the data in, we actually parse the XML, store it into an array, games array on the system. The reason we chose to do this is so that the users can quickly tick through the games without waiting. We don't want to make a service request call every single time the user ticks. We felt that this was a common action the users would do as far as ticking through. It just makes it easier. But another thing to note is you don't want to pull the farm in. If you have a large amount of data that you're dealing with that may not be viewed all the time, you set your services up so that you can request that when it's actually necessary. One problem that we faced actually is when the XML was pulled in, sometimes some games would actually change position inside the feed. And so when the update happened, you would actually tick in a different position, so your game would actually change on you. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? And so what we actually did was, once we pulled it into an array, we wrote a custom array sorting function in JavaScript. This is actually really easy to do. All you do is you have to write a 2-parameter function. It's parameter A and B, and it has to have 3 return values, -1, 1, or 0. And what you do is you do comparisons on pretty much anything you want to compare on to handle your sorting. Once you've written this function, you then can apply it simply by calling the array name sort and then inject the function name. And this can handle multi-dimensional arrays, single-dimensional arrays, kind of make your life easier. Okay, what Don was talking about was with the alpha channel, that pink area that's actually created, if you have some transparent pixels that are outside of your traditional alpha area where you're working, where you've defined your boundaries, even if that pixel is like a 2% transparency, when the gadget generates that alpha channel, it will detect that pixel and say, oh, well, maybe I'm not supposed to make that transparent, and it leaves that in there. Of course, if you don't have any image for it to reside there, it draws the pink color. So just when you're making your graphics, make sure they're clean. One of the more interesting things that we wanted to try and do was make this thing interactive. And by doing that, we created the ball traveling down the field. This is all done with nothing more than a defined region div layer. We've broken that down into number of pixels per yards. When the feed comes in, we determine where the ball is sitting, who the ball belongs to, so that we know where to draw the first down line, and then draw it on the screen. It's really that simple. Okay. As David had talked about earlier, the gadget platform really is powerful. But with that power and ease, it can kind of be a double-edged sword. You have all this power to work with something, and the point of entry is much lower now. So developers really anywhere, no matter what their experience level is, can start building desktop applications. So that can lead to a lot of common errors due to possibly inexperience or just not thinking about it. So there's when you're developing, there's a few good things that you can kind of take count of. We all hear about coding practices, coding standards. So everybody has their own standard that they kind of go by, but try to comment your code. That's something we all like. It's nice to come back to your code at a later date and actually see what's going on. On the flip side, though, I do feel like if you comment too heavy, that can also be cumbersome. If you go overboard and have more comments than your code, you're really having problems there. So that leads to descriptive variable names. It's nice to be able to know what's going on. There have been some studies where you can shrink down and actually increase your performance by lowering your variable sizes with JavaScript in particular. But there are actually applications out there that you can run, and it will do that for you at production time. And indentation. Just indent your code, make it more readable. The other thing is expect the unexpected. With gadgets, especially the nature of service-type gadgets, you're pulling in feeds that you've created or someone else has created, and you have no guarantee or control over the feed's uptime or what's in the feed or the cleanliness of that feed. So you need to make sure that you handle what if that feed's down, or what if you get something that you're not expecting. So try to make sure you initialize your variables so you get your functions get what they expect, and also try to put some error checking in there when you're actually populating your text areas. Instead of showing undefined or null, show something more appropriate. Give the users something that they're expecting. The other thing is, in the web world, resource management was not that important. The users would go to their site, that you would use it. If your site used a bit of their resources, wasn't that big an issue because their full attention is on your site. They open it, they read it, they shut it. Now with gadgets, you're sharing that resources and desktop real estate with other things that the user is doing. Even when your user is not interacting with your gadget, it's still taking out those resources. So you need to be mindful about what your gadget is doing, because if you start interrupting their productivity while they're working, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to shut down your gadget. Think about reusability. As Don said, one of the great things about this, we built this gadget in 2 weeks' time, graphics and everything, because we were able to reuse large portions of our code, large portions of our design from other applications. What the most of that time was actually spent was developing the new sidebar state, functionality, graphics, and whatnot. So when you're building something, ask yourself, how can I reuse this in the future? Because while it might be great to pile everything in a function just because it's easier, if you can abstract that out, you can maybe reuse however many extra functions you create, and it'll save you time and money in the long run. The last thing, and this is something that I really experienced working with Gadget, is really try to push technology beyond what you expect it traditionally. When I first started working with this, I was thinking about how can I create a multi-tiered application with a single HTML page. Our DirecTV actually drills down quite deeply into sports stats. So what we actually did was just use CSS and JavaScript to actually swap out div layers, the inner HTML, and things like that. And it actually came out with a nice solution that was really simple. So when you're approaching a problem, don't automatically write off the use of that technology just because it's not a traditional use, because you may find out that there's a much simpler use with that a much simpler solution with that technology than something that was more readily accepted. And that's pretty much it. And thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So you guys getting excited? Some cool things you can do with the platform. We think so, anyway. Last slide I wanted to talk to before we open it up for Q&A is, look, I wanted to talk about our broader gadget strategy at Microsoft. So Sidebar is key piece of our client-side gadget strategy. There's also another part of the client-side gadget strategy in the form of a device called Sideshow. So in the Vista timeframe, a lot of hardware manufacturers, so like in laptops, are going to be shipping new hardware, things like auxiliary displays built in. So you can imagine being able to power down your laptop. So the OS isn't running, you're on your way to a meeting, you want to access your meeting request or get data from an RSS feed, etc., with the OS powered down. So there's this auxiliary display, and it utilizes gadgets. And I want to be clear, these gadgets that run in the auxiliary display or Sideshow device are Windows objects. They're not DHTML objects. The integration, though, that we have with Sidebar and Sideshow takes the form of some APIs that we make available in our object model. So essentially, you can publish information from the gadget via XML and make it available to the Sideshow gadget. If some of you were here for the session immediately prior to this for live.com, you know then that we also have a web-based or server-based gadget strategy in the form of live.com. So those are DHTML gadgets. They also leverage the Atlas libraries, which, by the way, you can use to build your Sidebar gadgets. So you can use those JS libraries, helper functions, to build rich client functionality more quickly into your Sidebar gadget. But the live.com gadgets are hosted inside of a browser. Ours, again, are installed on the client. That's the big difference. Later this summer, we're working with the live.com team to develop some integration. And the scenario is such that you'll be when you add a gadget in your live.com, on your live.com space in your browser, you'll have some UI mechanisms to be able to add that gadget to Sidebar. And so essentially, it will download that gadget, install it. Of course, you'll be prompted. The user will get the prompt before it's installed. And then once it's installed, it behaves as a Sidebar gadget. And we think, though, that, and hope you'll agree, when you've seen some of the things that you can do with the rich UI functionality that we've included in Sidebar, we think that a lot of developers will build additional functionality into their gadgets so to take advantage of the richness that Sidebar has to offer. But again, you can leverage a lot of that, the functional code, the JS code, from the live.com gadget as well. So with that, in terms of next steps, we have a website, MicrosoftGadgets.com. That's a resource for us. We're posting some information. You've all gotten the February CTP version of Vista, which includes Sidebar. And we've posted some documents to that website that will go through our object model, so you can see all the methods and events and things that we expose. It also has some walkthroughs, so you can build a little Hello World gadget to get started. Going forward, we're also going to have, again, in the gadget gallery, I think I failed to show it to you. It's actually an important feature. But in the gadget gallery, there's a link. When you want to get more gadgets, you click on that link, and it'll go to this service. And this is where you can post your gadgets. So this will evolve over time. We'll be posting gadgets, more information, SDKs, etc. As Carl pointed out, too, there's some resources that he wanted to make sure you're aware of for Yahoo and the evolution of those APIs that he wants to make available. And I've also put my email up there. So I love feedback. So if you guys have some ideas, some questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer those. I understand there's also some session evaluation forms floating around, and I'm hearing that a lot of people aren't filling them out. But I guess there is a good reason to fill them out, because you can be entered in a drawing for the Zen Micro device. So I encourage you to fill out the feedback. Helps me too. Helps us do better presentations. So with that, I want to open it up for some questions. Who's going to be first? Could you step up to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Will the source code to the Fox gadget be available for download?
No, sadly, probably not right now. There are obviously rights issues with some of the feeds that we're using, so probably not. Although, I'm personally pushing towards a little bit more open sharing of some of the resources that we have. So, as soon as we can make things that are publicly available then yeah. But. Okay.
Hi. Is there a process for sending out updates or letting people know that you've got a new version of your gadget, I
Good question. So basically, there's version information that you can put into the gadget manifest. But the platform today does not have the facilities to do things like auto-updating. So what I would encourage you to do is publish a URL in your manifest that points the users at a website where they can continually stay abreast of the evolution of your gadget and newer versions. But that's certainly something we'll look at for future versions to make that more automated.
What mechanisms are there for protection of IP? I mean, the comment then about getting once you publish the gadget, it's only JavaScript and HTML, so whatever you put out, it's wide open. Is there any mechanisms there to protect that?
That's right. Well, you can certainly choose, so IP issues, if you could make provisions to protect your IP, but you'd have to roll up that code into like a DLL and then install it. So you'd have to, wrap the gadget in and build an installer, install it. As you said, that's the only way to really protect it because it is just script and HTML. So, next question? I'm sorry? Same question. Nice.
You had mentioned that it was installed on the desktop.
Yes.
Is it a problem if the users have lockdown sets, if they have no admin rights?
So, to run gadgets just requires the user, standard user privileges. But if the gadget required you to have administrator privileges because it used resources or COM object that required more privilege, then I would assume that you'd be blocked at that point.
But a standard gadget wouldn't, it'd be okay?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I've got my boss here. He's like going, no, you messed that up. Why don't you give him the real answer, David?
Yeah, I can answer the question for you.
Thank you.
I'm the general manager of the Windows Sidebar team. He showed you a demo where the gadget was on desktop. When you double click on it, what really happens under users, your profile, app data, local, super hidden is where it really gets installed. So it's actually, they're user-based things. So you don't need admin rights to do it. So a user can actually install it, and it will go into the app data.
Thanks. Next question. Go over here.
Right. Can we be able to make XML HTTP requests against multiple domains, like Firefox GooseMonkey?
Yes. The gadget doesn't limit you from doing calls to multiple domains like you would be limited in a browser.
Timing-wise, I understand why we're doing HTML here, but I'm wondering, is there a future for WPFE?
It's a great question. So question is, yeah, we have one gadget type right now. It's based on DHTML, and that's what we'll ship for version 1. But we're certainly looking at opportunities to expand the platform to support other gadget types, and WPFE is right at the top of the list. Over here.
So when you fill up your sidebar, where do you overflow to? Or is there provision for like stacking sidebars and somehow?
So basically we have this concept of overflow with the sidebar, and as the sidebar fills up with gadgets, it goes into an overflow. So it's just off screen. And then we have the provisions to kind of page, if you will, between the various overflow columns.
Does each gadget have its own processor? How do I know which one's eating up the most CPU so I can end it?
Yeah, no. Each gadget has its own thread, but it runs in a single sidebar executable process. So
how do you know which one to kill?
So the sidebar, through sidebar, you manage your gadget instances. And so if a gadget misbehaves, whatnot, you have the ability to turn it off, that particular gadget. But you wouldn't see it so they aren't really applications, so it's not going to show up in the process viewer. It's not going to show up in Alt Tab, etc. So all those threads are managed by the sidebar executable process.
But I can't see which one is eating the most CPU. Just in case, I install one, I don't know which one it is that's really munching down on the CPU, so I don't know which one to uninstall.
Right. I don't know that there'd be an easy way to profile that. Would you, either of you guys?
Inside the gadget you have.
Do you?
Hello? Oh. Inside the taskbar, I know currently there is, under options, you can actually open up a panel and it lists which gadgets are currently running, and you can actually kill tasks on them. I don't know if there's a CPU usage on them, though. I know developing things that is a handy thing, because I was actually loading gadgets off the desktop at one time. I was like, where'd it go? So that you can kill them from inside of there.
So Sidebar includes the provisions to stop and start gadget instances, but you're not going to be able to get the access to specific CPU utilization for that particular gadget. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you host a WPF application inside an iframe or HTML?
Question is, could you support a WPF application in iframe and HTML? You could, but you kind of give up a lot. You don't have any integration then with the gadget as a platform per se, so you wouldn't get events like the dock and undock events, and you wouldn't be able to interact with our persistence model for settings. So it's quite a big trade-off.
Do you have any provisions other than warning the user about installing like malware? Because even though users get warnings anyway for like adware, they just go ahead and install it. And if it can access the OS, what are the provisions against that?
It's exactly like an executable. So you get the warning that you get if you're installing an executable, and if you choose to install it, it's at your risk at that point.
Are they easier to uninstall?
Absolutely. Gadgets are really easy to uninstall. Within the gadget gallery, you can right-click on them and uninstall them. Also, even in running instances, you can close them and then easily uninstall them as well.
And there's no way to, like, some of the adware people hide it from the Windows uninstall. I mean, that's deep in the OS where they can't override that. The uninstall feature.
That's right. That's right. So everything about Sidebar is user-driven. So you can't programmatically instantiate a gadget. You can't programmatically inhibit somebody from uninstalling a gadget or even being able to close the gadget, because the platform handles that UI and those methods. Next over here.
Yes, from a standard application running, can you query the Sidebar to see if your Sidebar gadget is running and poke at it and feed it information?
The answer is no. You can provide a service that the gadget calls into, but gadgets can't communicate amongst themselves and processes, so application processes and gadgets.
Is there a timeline for the flyout APIs to come out so you can extend past the 130 pixels on the desktop?
Yes, so we're looking at adding that certainly before we release with Vista, but I'm hoping to add it in the beta 2 timeframe.
Can you explain the setup in a little more detail? First, I thought it was just a zip file, but it turns out you can also install ActiveX controls? Or?
No. So let me be very clear. So when the bundle, the gadget, won't install, COM objects, ActiveX controls, etc. So if you are utilizing a COM object, you either have to install it separately through another application or write an installer for the gadget. But when you just have the zip file that has the gadget extension, and you double click on it, you'll get the warning, and then if you OK to install it, it goes to where David had suggested. It goes to the user app data sidebar. It's kind of hidden down there into a gadgets directory that's specific to you as a user.
But in that case, if I'm not using COM, then the security issues, well, you can still use this scripting and that kind of stuff.
That's right. There's still plenty of unsafe things that you can do in script without a COM object. So.
Yeah, but then the IP rights issue comes back into play. So unless I do a special install, I can't hide anything, right?
That's right. Okay. That's very true.
Can the gadgets bring themselves to the front? So based on an event, it's seeing they're monitoring something in the background, game over or whatever, can they bring themselves up to the front, or they've got to rely on a user interaction to do that?
I believe they need to rely on the user for that. So there's a bring to front, but I don't.
There is an API that you can call to say, bring the front for your gadget.
I can't recall if we still have it.
Well, yeah, I'm going with the old APIs. They haven't shown me the new ones yet, but the old ones there was one.
Yeah,
it was there, yeah.
In sort of an example where you're monitoring a service for some reason, you're waiting for an event to happen, and it's
to bring it.
Draw it to your attention.
So your feedback is that you'd find that useful.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Very.
Thank you.
I got to ask an unpopular question.
I'm sorry?
I got to ask an unpopular question.
That's all right.
In this room. Is there a group policy to prevent users from installing gadgets?
Yes. That's not an unpopular question at all. I think it's going to be on the minds of enterprises, and we do certainly support group policy so that IT administrators can lock down the installations. So if there aren't additional questions, I really appreciate your attention. I know this is the last session of the day, and I'm standing between you and hopefully some fun tonight. So again, thanks for coming, and hope you enjoyed the session.